Tony, we appreciate you being so patient. It is a pleasure to have you join us on such short notice. I know you're running around busy like crazy. How's everything up there in Cleveland, Ohio?
Well, Cavs are home tonight. Elimination game for them. A little trepidation there. The Guardians aren't doing so well lately, and the Browns don't have a pick until the third round of the draft. So it's tough times right now, sports-wise, in Cleveland.
I got to ask you, though, about this the real quick before we get to the Browns, about the Cavaliers thing, because we talk about the NBA playoffs. I think a lot of people knew this was going to be a tough series, defensive-minded kind of a series. But what's the talk up there in Cleveland about what's happened so far, down 3-1?
Everybody's pretty disappointed. It's been a great Cavs season. 51 wins in the regular season, the most since, the post-LeBron eras. So everyone's pretty disappointed in the way they've played. Their big gun, Donovan Mitchell's had some really bad games, and they don't seem to. They're the lowest scoring team in the NBA playoffs right now, and so it's negating a really great defensive team, and everyone's disappointed, but optimistic that if they win this game, they might pull it together, although they haven't won in Madison Square Garden all year long.
Okay, I want to shift gears to the Browns. We were talking before you came on. This time a year ago, Deshaun Watson comes over, couldn't get near the facility and all these kinds of things because of his suspension. Once he came back, a little more than midway through the year, didn't look so great. I would imagine, though, there has to be optimism about Watson getting back to the player he was in Houston. Is that safe to say?
Well, it's certainly safe to say, Thom, inside the building, the Browns are encouraged, optimistic, and any other adjective you want to use about Watson now being available from day one, without any threat of interruption of his season, no further suspensions. He'll resolve the one or two legal civil lawsuits against them, and it's more normal. And they've added to their team offensively with 2 veteran wide receivers in this offseason. So they are gung-ho, the team itself. There's a little hesitancy in the fandom to be as optimistic. But listen, everyone in town knows that the Browns season and their immediate future rests totally on the shoulders of Deshaun Watson.
How would you rate, Tony, their offseason so far this year?
Well, I think they did well when it comes to trying to surround Watson, with more speed. They picked up 2 veteran receivers and a tight end that he's familiar with from his years in Houston. The problem was, last year when Jacoby Brissett played 11 games as kind of like the replacement quarterback, he had his best year of his career, but the Browns were losing games because their defense and their special teams were just losing the games for them. Now, they changed coordinators at both of those areas, and I thought that was those 2 men, the new defensive coordinator, Jim Schwartz, new special teams coordinator, Bubba Ventrone, probably will stand as the most important new additions to the team this year beyond any player. So if you draw them into their offseason, they've had a pretty good offseason, a very aggressive offseason.
Would you say that since they don't have a pick, first couple of rounds, they've traded all those away, what would be their goal? Is there a positional goal, where they're trying to find a guy to help most once they do finally have a pick?
Yeah, sure. They're pretty light at defensive end. They added 1 in free agency. They have Myles Garrett, one of their best players, but also at defensive end, but they still need kind of a third defensive end to help that rotation. And I think that's what they would earmark with the 3rd pick in the draft, as number 74 overall. I still think there's a chance that they add another veteran pass rusher. There's another wave of free agency to come after the draft. the bargain basement phase, and I think they will seek to add defensive ends. But in the draft, I would pinpoint defensive end or defensive tackle. They've added a lot of defensive tackles, but I think they still feel they might need another one there. So anything on the defensive line, I would look for.
Okay, is it realistic or completely unrealistic to believe the Browns could compete with the Bengals, who look like the best team on paper? They've been the best team the last 2 years. Baltimore, if Jackson gets back. Any reason to believe they can compete with those two?
Yeah, I do think that. First of all, Watson's got to resemble his former self, and when you look at what happened to him last year and what happened to the Browns, to drop him from the sky in the 12th week of the season after not playing for 700 days, that was a tall task. The team never adapted to him, and Watson never shook off all the rust. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt there that Watson will be more close to his old self. But the other reason I say it's totally realistic is, for some reason, even though the defensive coordinator has been fired and replaced, the Browns defense played Cincinnati and Baltimore extremely well over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
And to me, the shortest path to the playoffs is winning the division. Don't worry about Kansas City or Buffalo or anyone else. And they've been close, even though the record has been 8-9 and 7-10 over the last 2 years. They've competed against the best teams in their division pretty well. So I think that gap is narrower than it might appear, and that's why I think it is realistic if several things go right.
Last question: Is Stefanski on a kind of do or die season?
He'll probably appear on the 5 hottest seats in the NFL at the beginning of the year on those lists. I don't think he's at the top of that list. I think the ownership is trying to resist making another change. He's the first coach in 11 years in this ownership to even make it to a 4th season. 11 years, he's the only one to make it to year number 4 on his contract. And I think they also realize that he's still young and growing into the job. I think he's 40 years old, still one of the youngest coaches in the league. Nationally, he'll be on the hot list. I think it's hotter outside the building than it is inside the building.
Okay. Tony, we can't thank you enough for your time. Thank you for your patience today, and enjoy the draft. It's going to be fun the next few days.
Yeah, well, we're going to sit out the first round and watch everybody else make their mistakes.
Fair enough. All the best, my friend. Thank you so much for your time today. Right. Good to see you again.
All right. Thank you, Thom.
All right. Tony Grossi, kind enough to stay very patient. Casey, nicely done. Paul, nicely done.